I am very pleased to be joined by Bradley Waese, a CPA and managing partner of SF Partnership LLP. We're going to talk a bit today about the government programs that are available to help businesses and employees get through the COVID crisis that's ongoing. So hello, Brad. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Hi, Gary. It's a pleasure.
So there are a number of government programs that are now available. They seem to be defining themselves day by day. So with the caveat that we're going to give the best available knowledge today and things may change Monday or a couple days from now, why don't we just go through the various programs that we want to talk about? You've told me there are lots of new acronyms, so you can help with those. There's the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, now known as CERB, although you're telling me it was formerly known as CERB.
Yes.
We also have the Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, which is going to provide up to 75% of employee wages for qualifying businesses. So that's going to be of a great deal of interest to both employers and employees. The Canada Emergency Business Account, which is being administered through the banks, making loans of up to $40,000 available. And then we want to talk a bit about what the government's done to provide some tax relief, both in terms of payment obligations, and I want to hear a bit about filing obligations. So Brad, why don't I turn it over to you and let's talk about CERB.
CERB is a program instituted early on. That's the $2,000 a month subsidy for people who don't qualify for EI and have not or do not anticipate getting any wages in the next 14 business days from the start of, we're now in the first period. It's separated into 4-week periods. So a lot of people are asking the question as to how much can I earn, or can I earn anything, and how's it calculated? And how it's currently stated is that you can't earn any income. If you're an employee or were employee, that it would include any wages paid. If you're self-employed, that means you can't bill anything in that 14-day period. So, and through your collection of CERB, you cannot collect any wages or self-employed income, or it will disqualify you.
So that particularly for small businesses creates a bit of a quandary. People who, as an example, they may have a couple of major clients who are now closed down, but they may have a trickling of smaller projects that are still out there. This program, as it now stands, basically is disqualifying people who work even a couple of hours during the qualifying period. Is that the bottom line right now?
That is the bottom line. As you said earlier, you got to check daily on CRA's websites to figure out exactly what the rules are. But currently you can earn no income, not small amount. There is no threshold of income that you can earn and still qualify.
And I would say, and this is pure spitballing, that this looks like an area that probably will get a further review once it's up and running and the government can see who is benefiting and who still needs to benefit from it. Do you agree with that as sort of a crystal ball prognostication?
I do. I think all the programs will evolve depending on how long this pandemic continues. And from everything we've heard today, I wouldn't be expecting to go back to work until sometime this summer at best. But I expect that all these rules will change as the complaints start funneling in. My understanding is that a number of self-employed people have just defer doing any billing while they are collecting under the CERB, and will continue it at a later point in time. Because the CERB is broken into different periods, you can pick up work for one period and then discontinue that work in the next, and therefore not be eligible for the $2,000 subsidy for that period.
This money, when received, it's going to be considered taxable income, is that correct?
That is correct. Through all the programs, all the government subsidies are going to be considered taxable, and I'm sure they'll add a box to the 2020 tax returns for everybody can put their income in there.
Right. Okay. Well, do you want to move on then to the emergency wage subsidy, which is for employers, perhaps the big ticket item that can make a real difference during this period in terms of their ability to function and keep employees hired. What do we know about that so far?
It's a 75% of wages paid subsidies with a lot of definitions in there. Your wages include your regular wages paid plus any taxable benefits that were paid. It is also based on the higher of current wages paid and what they're calling crisis wages paid, which is the average weekly salary that was paid between January 1st and May 15th of 2020. So if wages were reduced subsequent to March 15th, you will still be eligible for a wage subsidy of 75% of the pre-crisis wages paid. You're only eligible for this subsidy if you have, for the first 4 weeks, a 50% decline in revenue, and for the next 2 periods, a 30% decline in revenue. And a decline in revenue, revenue is defined to be the revenue that you've been using for your accounting principles, and the period is, and you can choose either of the two, the month-over-month period. So you could choose March 2020 versus March 2019, or you can use the average revenue for January and February of 2020. So if your revenue was $100,000 in March 2020, and it was $150,000 in March 2019, you would qualify. If it was $100,000 in March 19th, you don't qualify unless your salary, your revenues for January and February 2020 were, say, $150,000, and you've now had that 30% decline from January and February. So if you averaged January and February $150,000, and in March you averaged 100,000, or March you had 100,000 of revenues, you would again have that 15% decline. In April and May, it's the same calculations, but it's a 30% decline, or at least currently in the laws today.
What is revenue for the purpose of calculating this eligibility? Is it cash flow, meaning dollars in, or is it invoiced amounts, or something in between?
So since this is businesses are on the accrual basis, so it means invoiced revenue. And it specifically says in accordance with your accounting principles of the previous period. So what I would do is I would continue to account for revenues as I always had in the past, and use that as my basis for calculating my percent decrease.
So for law firms and other professional services, it's simply going to be billed amounts compared month to month from 19 to 20?
For those law firms who are accounting for revenue based on an invoice basis, that would be correct. Some law firms account for revenue based on a WIP basis, and that you would use your accumulated WIP during the period. I would put a proviso on that, is that I would make sure that all the WIP was good, and I would provide for any WIP that you believe not to be collectible, which I guess in these times is a difficult thing to assess.
And once again, this subsidy, will that be considered taxable income?
It will. In all cases, the subsidy is taxable income.
So the government's going to give you up to 75%, but then that'll be included in your income that's reported for 2020, and it will be subject to tax at whatever your rate is.
That's correct.
So it's not free money.
It is free taxable money.
Oh, that's the kind the government likes.
It's like gambling wages, gambling earnings.
All right. Anything you want to add on this one? I'm guessing that this is going to be fine-tuned a bit as well. The way it's constituted now, it almost seems like luck of the draw. If you happen to have a lousy month in March of 2019, you're going to be out of luck. If you did reasonably well in March of 2020, if you had a great year last year, then you're going to qualify. And we're not looking at averaging at this point, but I would suspect this will be fine-tuned as well.
They've already added the January and February average revenue to determine whether you are down, and they changed the first March period to a 15% decline from a 30% decline to a 15% decline, which is brand new, slightly a couple of days ago.
Yeah, if we're using January, February as our baseline, so we would average January and February of 2020, and that would be the number that would be compared to March of 2020 for qualification?
Yes.
Okay, and presumably, would you need to continue to use January, February for subsequent months, or is
Yes, you can. You can. As currently written, you would use January and February as your baseline for each of the 3 periods.
Okay, but once you've chosen that, that's your baseline. You can't switch back.
You can switch back.
Okay, so basically, whatever is mathematically more likely to qualify you would be what you would do in any given period. Is that?
That's correct.
I hope that wasn't spoken too much like an accountant. It was totally unintentional. Canada Emergency Business Account. You've got an acronym for that, right? CEBA?
CEBA. We have acronyms for everything.
Good. So this is the loan of up to $40,000 that is available if repaid by 2022.
December 2022.
10,000 of it is essentially forgiven. So only 30,000 is repayable. First of all, is that 10,000 going to be considered taxable income?
It will.
Okay, just wondering. So I've received notifications from my bank about the application process through the banks. I take it that's standard across the board?
It is. It's being administrated by your primary bank. You can only apply to your primary bank.
And primary bank means where you have your ordinary business accounts?
Correct. You must have a business account with that bank in order to qualify.
And do we know anything about how promptly funds are going to be advanced, or anything about the administration? This is just starting now, as I understand it.
Yeah, my understanding is it's going to, funds are going to be reasonably fast advanced, and the applications are coming fast and furious. So my recommendation would be to apply quickly. You do have to qualify for the CEBA. It's you do have to have payroll between $50,000 and $100,000 on your 2019 T4 in order to qualify.
Sorry, is 100,000 a cap on that?
Sorry, between $50,000 and $1 million.
Okay, $1 million, yes.
Of payroll. I seem to have dropped a zero there.
I'll keep that in mind. So is this money now being advanced? Has the program actually started, or is it just starting up now?
The program has started. I don't believe that any money, I have not seen any money being advanced yet, but the program is in place and being administered now. So the banks are providing applications. My understanding is all the banks' applications are online. So you can't go into your bank to apply. You can't call your lending associate at the bank and have them fill out the file. You actually have to go online. But I would call your bank and go over your situation with them to ensure that you are qualified, because my understanding is each bank has slightly different rules that they use in addition to the rules that the Fed's announced.
And are the banks actually advancing the money? Is the debt going to be to the bank, or is the debt going to be to the government of Ontario?
The banks are financing the money. It's the Feds who are supporting these loans through the Business Development Bank. But it's the banks who are actually going to be forwarding the money.
And again, who do I owe the money to if I get this loan? Do I owe it to my bank, or do I owe it to? Okay.
My understanding is it's to the banks, guaranteed by the Business Development Bank.
There are also a number of changes in terms of tax filings, HST and income tax filings, that I wanted to talk about, and as well changes to when funds are due. So Brad, if you want to speak to that, that would be really helpful. Thanks.
For corporations who had taxes that were due after March 15th of 2020, their filing deadlines have now extended to June 30th, and the actual taxes owing are going to be penalty and interest free to August 31st of 2020. For individuals whose filing deadlines were April 30th, that extension has been a month to June 1st. And for self-employed individuals who would have otherwise had a June 15th deadline, actually still have a June 15th deadline that hasn't moved. And once again, penalties and interest on taxes owing have been deferred to August 31st. Also note for corporations, the EHT limit has been adjusted from $400,000 to a $1 million exemption on the first $1 million of wages. And WSIB payments have also been deferred.
So for small businesses, proprietorships, if they file on June 15th, that's still the case, but their tax obligations will not need to be paid until August 31st. That's the bottom line for small businesses?
That is.
Okay, and what about HST, GST?
HST, GST, the filing deadlines haven't changed, but remittances do not have to be made until June 30th.
So bottom line, for those who are filing for the first quarter of 2020, we still have an April filing deadline, but we've got a deferral on payment of the HST obligations.
That's correct.
Okay, Brett, any other government programs or initiatives you wanted to
For
touch
those
upon?
people who may have not had a drop in revenue of 15% in March or 30% in April and May, the old wage subsidy program is still available, where you can get up to 10% subsidy of wages, and that got applied against payroll remittances payable. And that was a maximum of $25,000. So to be eligible, though, you have to be a qualifying corporation and therefore had under $50 million of taxable capital. That was basically the total of your equity and loans in your company. So not a great alternative from the 75% wage subsidy, but at least that's something if you didn't qualify.
And presumably you can't get both.
You cannot. It's only for those people who didn't qualify for the 75% wage subsidy. There's also another bank initiative through the Business Development Bank of Canada where you can qualify for up to $6.5 million of bank loans, and that's for all corporations, partnerships, and individuals who where BDC through their qualification program, but financed through the feds, will end up to $6.5 million for companies suffering from the effects of the pandemic.
Okay, that's great and really, really helpful, Brad. We'll have to keep our ears to the ground because this is evolving by the day. If there are some big changes ahead, I hope you'll come back and talk to me again about them. But I'd really like to thank you for your time and great advice, as always.
You're welcome, Garry, and thanks.
Okay, take it easy.
Bye-bye.